Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video I'm going to be discussing my kind of overall TBR list, and this will largely be for next year, but my TBR list is kind of always changing and growing, partially because I keep buying more books, which I'm not going to stop doing either. But I wanted to kind of just get out to anyone watching wondering what they might see, or if there's something that you have an opinion on that's on my list, or an opinion that's not on my list. I'm sure there'll be plenty of those too. I'd be really interested to hear, but kind of wanted to talk through what my TBR priority is. So this is going to be 3 sections, and the first is, you haven't read that? For things that I've been hearing about a lot, that I really do need to read because they're big things that I'm interested in and are supposed to be extremely good. Then it's the kind of the TBR for things that are a series I'm continuing, and then I kind of have the oddball others, which is going to be a very impartial list because I have a ton of books that fall into that category, but I'm going to talk about the ones that I've kind of put above the other just general miscellaneous books that I picked up. So with that, let's start with the you haven't read that section. And this really has to start with Kings of the Wild. I do have both Kings of the Wild and Bloody Rose. I bought both of them, mostly because Daniel Green wouldn't stop talking about them, and I'm assuming I'm going to like them based on that. And with these 2 books, I've heard so much about it just being this crazy, fun adventure that's supposed to be really, really enjoyable. A lot of kind of themes relating to 80s music in the first book from what I've heard too, and I love 80s music, so I'm pretty pumped there. So those are definitely pretty high priority for books that I need to get to, and I've had them a while, and I just haven't had a chance to get to them because I've had so much going on with other books I've been reading, so those are definitely pretty high. Next up, one I've had for quite some time too, I picked up at my used bookstore, American Gods. The only other Gaiman book that I have read was Good Omens with Terry Pratchett. I know he wrote a lot of the actual prose, and I loved that book, so it's made me excited, even though I know American Gods is very different. It's definitely something that I've been interested in trying. I've heard kind of mixed things with American Gods too, so some people seem to really, really like it, some people not as much, but it's something I am definitely interested in seeing and reading, something else that Neil Gaiman wrote. I think it'll be an interesting time in general. Jumping back even further, we have the Dragonbone Chair by Tad Williams. So this is definitely something older. I have a newer copy. This was actually a brand new copy my used bookstore had, so I was pretty happy about that. But this series, Memory of Sorrow and Thorn, in general, is something that I've meant to get to for a long time. I've been trying to go back and read a lot of older fantasy because there's so much new stuff, but there's so much old stuff I haven't read as well. So this is one I really want to get to. I've heard it compared to Wheel of Time in a lot of ways, and of course, being a huge Wheel of Time fan, this is definitely something that I want to read. Now, this is another one where I've heard so much about this book, and I bought it. I have heard very few people who didn't like it or say it's really, really good. That'd be Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. So I've had this one for a bit too. It sounds like it's going to be interesting, and from some of the things I've heard, I'm not sure if I'll really enjoy it or not, but I've heard almost all glowing reviews with very few people who just weren't a huge fan for one reason or another. So that's definitely up in the list as well as one of those books I need to get to. And then we have the Broken Earth trilogy and or 5th season. And the reason I've not started is because the only book I have is The Stone Sky. This was another one. It was a brand new copy that my used bookstore had for much cheaper. And because I only have book 3, I have not started reading. I still need to get the other, books 1 and 2. Usually you go in that order. So that's one, hopefully, once I get the other books, I will get to. But it is also something too that I know is pretty much everyone has read, so I'm a little bit behind the times there. And last but not least, I have the Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. And I've actually seen a few things recently making it seem like this one is pretty divisive as well, but I've never read Robin Hobb, and I have long heard about her being just a fantastic author. Always check my used bookstore, they never had anything, and finally I found actually even book 1 of the Farseer trilogy, so this is definitely one I want to give a good try as well, and get that in. So that's my kind of books that I'm way behind on and probably should have already read. We're going to now make a new stack of books magically appear for the TBR continuing series. So I have to start with the series that will probably make it so that I don't get to nearly as many of those books in the first category as soon as I should, and that is Crown of Stars by Kate Elliott. So this is book 2, Prince of Dogs. I had finally found book 1. I had seen several books of the series out of order in my used bookstore for a long time, and I finally got book 1 and read it, and I know this one apparently is divisive too, but I really, really enjoyed it. It was slow at parts, but just the very slow, deliberate world building of this really, really well done world. I enjoyed it so much for that reason. So I have the last 6 books. I ended up buying the set online because you can just barely see it on the shelf down there. But I knew I was going to want to read this whole series, so that's something that will definitely be taking a good portion of my reading time. But the books aren't terribly long, so it shouldn't be a huge amount of time. With that, though, another big series that I really want to get through is the second Thomas Covenant series. So this was one I had bought a box set of the first series at my used bookstore because I had a really good deal on it. I read the first book and wasn't really feeling it. It was good, but it was just really different, and there were a lot of things I had some issues with. I finally pushed through, read the second book, and then almost immediately had to read the final book in that first trilogy. Truly a masterpiece, and with the way the first trilogy ended, I am really interested to see where it's going to go from here. So these are ones too I really, really am interested to get to, just because the first trilogy was so good. I definitely want to keep going with that. Next up, we have The Black Company by Glenn Cook. You can see I still have a bookmark in this one. And I didn't stop reading it for any particular reason. This is the first 3 books in one. I read the first one, and then I just moved on to other things, and it's been sitting in my currently reading on Goodreads for quite some time at this point. So that's one, too, I definitely want to get into. I've never read any of The Black Company or Glenn Cook before, and I really enjoyed it. It was something really different, but kind of like the grimdark before grimdark was a thing, and really, really good overall in the way the storytelling worked. I enjoyed quite a lot, so I definitely want to get to that. Next, we have Prince of Fools. I only have the first book in this trilogy, which is Red Queen's War. Couldn't remember. I read the Thorns, I guess the Broken Empire trilogy with Jorg. Yeah, it's whatever. He's an 80s metal guy now. I read that trilogy, really enjoyed it. It was something really different, even for grimdark. It was very unique, and I really, really enjoyed that, so I'm pretty keen on reading more of Mark Lawrence's work. I know some of his newer stuff is looked at as being even better, like Book of the Ancestor, but I kind of want to just go in order because that's just kind of the way I do things. So there's that. And then finally, we have Red Country by Joe Abercrombie, and I don't have any of the Age of Madness books, the new ones. I wanted to read this first. I've kind of had a love-hate relationship with Joe Abercrombie. The books are usually really good, but I've definitely had complaints with most of them too. But I most certainly want to keep reading his books, and I will most likely end up reading the Age of Madness trilogy afterwards as well, but that's going to be a bit more down the line. So that is my kind of continuing things I've already been working on series-wise. Last section we have is the other section, which is a bit more eclectic, with mostly books I do also already have, with a few that I don't yet have but I've heard good things. So let's talk about those. Alright, so these don't really go in any particular order. Most of them are books that I actually don't know a ton about because I just kind of randomly picked them up because they sounded interesting at my bookstore. And the first one is Quicksilver by Neil Stephenson, and this is part of a trilogy called the Baroque Cycle. And I think there were more later, but it was originally a trilogy. But it takes place in a kind of a Baroque world in Europe mostly, it sounds like, and is kind of more of a I don't even want to say historical fiction, but there's a lot of history and science and political intrigue involved. And like I said, I really don't know a ton about this. I picked it up partially. I actually really like the artwork on this and the others. It's large, so I only grabbed the first book, but I have the other 2 as well. So this was just something kind of random. I like to jump into books blind so that I don't have expectations, because I have had books where I didn't like them because of my expectations, and other books that I might not have enjoyed nearly as much if I knew what I was getting into. So that kind of, you'll see a recurring theme with that there as well, but that's definitely one I am interested in. Next up we have The Cycle of Fire by Janie Wirtz. and it's an interesting name to say. I thought I got it wrong for a second. And this is one I literally got this omnibus version that actually has 3 books in it. Whenever I can get these, I love getting these used because you don't spend that much. It's just one actual book, but you're getting 3. So I really enjoy getting things like this as well. So interesting cover art here as well, and it sounds like it's going to be just kind of really interesting, more classic fantasy kind of style, grand epic battle, good versus evil, which I like that kind of thing too. So that's another one that I picked up randomly and want to get to before too long. Now this one's kind of a mix next, but we have Rune of Kings by Jen Lyons, and this one I did randomly see and thought it was interesting. It was, once again, a good deal at my used bookstore, which, once again, look at this. This is practically new. There's a blemish here, but they get really good quality stuff, and I love it. So I got this one to try, and I've heard mixed things after. Some people really like this, some people really don't, but it's another one I wanted to try. I know there's at least one other book out in this series at this point, so it's one that I'll be looking to if I do enjoy it. The next one is one of those ones that I don't have, and that's Priory of the Orange Tree. I had actually never heard of this until recently, but I've seen multiple booktubers that I tend to frequent recommend this book very highly, and the premise sounded interesting as well, so this is one that I'm working on getting at some point, and then I'll definitely be adding it probably up higher to the list, but I don't have it at this point, so that's why it's in the others section right now. Next up, then, I also have another kind of random one, which is Acacia, The War with the Mean. And this is book 1 in a series as well. And this is just one I thought looked and sounded pretty interesting in general. And this is a guy, apparently the author used to do historical fiction and then went into fantasy. So with that, I'm expecting quite a lot of world building and kind of that historical feel to it, which I do enjoy. Like I mentioned with Crown of Stars, you can just tell when people have done their research as authors. And so it's something I really do enjoy reading a lot of with it. And then we have The Unremembered by Peter William. I know literally nothing about this book. To be honest, I recognized Peter William's name because apparently he's friends with Brandon Sanderson, and I remembered reading him, so I picked this up. And this seems like it's going to be kind of a unique book. Apparently he's kind of known as being a unique author from the bits that I've heard, so I'm really interested to see what this ends up being like in general, and so that's definitely one that I have been waiting on. I've had it in my list, and I've had other things, and I'll keep doing that. It's just kind of what I do. But it definitely is on the list. Finally, we have one last book that I don't actually have yet, but that I'm very interested in from a lot of things that I've heard, and that's Malice by John Gwynne. This one I'm actually kicking myself for because my bookstore had a copy of it, and I didn't get it. And I'm like, that looks kind of cool, it sounded kind of interesting, but I usually try to limit how many books I buy because even used and cheaper, it still adds up. So I didn't end up getting it. Then I started hearing about how amazing it is, and it was gone. So this series is definitely one that I want to read. I've heard really good things, and it sounds like it'll mesh with my style. So this definitely on the list as well. So that is my really long, ever-changing and growing TBR list. Like I said, let me know if you have any thoughts on the books that are on the list or not on the list. Let me know, are there any books here or elsewhere that you're really looking forward to that you've been meaning to get to? I'm always happy to hear more recommendations and add to the list and make it even harder on myself, because that's just what I do, like I said. With that, if you enjoyed the video, then feel free to give it a like. And if you want to see my other content, largely reviews and coming reviews of the books that I've talked about here, then feel free to subscribe.